welcome back. Thanks for joining me here at Happily in the Middle today. If you're new here, thanks for popping over. Today we're right in the middle of this 5-part video series about strategies to use in the classroom to support English learners. Today I'm going to be focusing on a strategy that you use for reading. It's called chunking text. Now, if you're a literacy or a reading teacher, this is probably not a new strategy to you, and you probably are already using it in your class with your students. And that's awesome. If it's not a strategy that you've heard of yet, or maybe you're a content area teacher and you're struggling with these new ideas that Common Core has kind of pushed into the content areas, that we are all reading teachers and we need to teach students to read and write within our content area, this is a strategy that's really going to help you maximize the reading comprehension levels of your students when you read through challenging or difficult text with them. I just want to say again that the strategies I've been sharing with you are really strategies that can help any student in your classroom. So just because they're an English learner doesn't mean they're the only ones who are going to benefit. Every student can benefit from these strategies. We have really diverse makeups in our classroom. So we have students with learning differences, we have English learners, we have students who are far above grade level, at grade level, below grade level, far below grade level in their reading abilities. And so using these strategies is going to be really helpful to all of your students. Though you may be targeting a particular subgroup, every student is going to benefit from them. So just because you don't have an English learner in your class, don't leave, because there are a lot of things that you can still use in your class with your students to increase and maximize that reading comprehension. So here's the gist of what it means to chunk text. Chunking text is a strategy that you use to break text down into smaller, more comprehensible bits of information to maximize the reading comprehension of your students. Yes, I know that this takes a lot of time, and sometimes it can even take time for you as a teacher to prep. But if your goal is to really maximize that comprehension, this is a really effective strategy to use with your students in the classroom. When you begin, chunking text really starts with identifying the passage that you want to read with your students. It could be an entire chapter, it could be a section of a text, it could be a paragraph, or it could be a couple sentences within a paragraph. Really depends on what your purpose and your focus is. So part one really is you need to identify the text that you are going to use when you break it down for students. Once you have your text identified and you're ready to go through it with your students, what I usually do is I have my students do a preview of the text. And so what this means is they look at the pictures, the titles, the subtitles, the headings, they look at the captions, any illustrations or charts, and we begin to make some predictions or come up with ideas of what we think this text is going to be about. Now, please note, you do not have to chunk text or do this with all of the text that you do in your class, but if you feel that a piece of text or a passage is particularly important to the lesson you're teaching, I really recommend it. So take your students through that preview process, have them do partner discussions or something like a stand-up, hand-up, pair-up so they can get up out of their seats a little and walk around and share some of their observations or the ideas they have about what they're going to be reading about today. Once you've done a preview of the text, begin by reading the text aloud to your students or having students read it to each other. Now, it's really important to note that you don't want to give a high Lexile leveled text to struggling readers or students who really struggle with understanding and comprehending what they're reading. If we give students a high level Lexile text and they are not anywhere near that level in their reading abilities, we're going to cause frustration in them, and then it'll probably result in bad behavior because they're embarrassed or they're just frustrated or they don't understand what's happening. So I often suggest that you read the text aloud to the students the first time you work through it, and then have students read it to each other in partners, or you can have students volunteer to read the text out loud in class. When I work through a chunking the text experience, I read it 3 times, or we read it 3 times as a class. The first time I read it aloud. The second time, students will volunteer themselves to read aloud. I don't do popcorn reading, and that's just like a personal philosophy. And then the third time, students read to each other. So they are getting a lot of experience reading and rereading these passages in the classroom. Now, as you're reading, I recommend that you read like 3 to 4 sentences or a paragraph at a time, and then you stop and you digest the text a little bit with students. So this could look like writing down annotations, circling words, highlighting words, asking a follow-up question like what did we just read, or summarize to your elbow partner in your own words what was the text about. Just break that text down a little bit and give students an opportunity to chew or digest on that text so it will begin to make meaning. I do recommend that you have your students engage in some kind of note-taking, so maybe like a 4-square note-taking activity, notes on a piece of paper, or what I have my students do is annotate the text, because I'm teaching my students to talk to the text or think out loud as they're reading. And that way at the end we can look back at our notes and see what we have learned during this reading process. Now I also want to say, really emphasize the importance of quick notes. You're jotting down ideas, just 1, 2, or 3 words. They do not need to be complete sentences. It's just enough to remember the main idea. I also use symbols with my students like question mark, exclamation point, or I don't know, a carrot, or just different symbols in the text just to really help students engage with the text. Now, once you have chunked through the text and you have given students time to read and reflect and then digest a little and then read and reflect and digest the text and then read and reflect and digest the text, then what you should do is have your students go back and do like some kind of a summary to retell what happened in the text. This is a really great opportunity to help students synthesize those important main ideas. Now, if you've done the annotations like I do with my students, what I have them do is look back at their annotation notes and look for big ideas, central ideas, or themes that we found along the way. And then they want to pull that together, which we often do with a graphic organizer, by the way, because my students really struggle with reading and need that support. So we'll pull those ideas together in a graphic organizer, and then we use that to write our summary or our reflection of the text. I really suggest that if you're introducing chunking and chewing or just chunking text to your students, that you model this multiple times for them in class so that they can learn this routine of preview the text, make predictions about the text, stop and read sections of the text, chew on, digest on those ideas and take quick notes, summarize those main ideas. So I really recommend that you model this and do some guided practice with your students. In my classroom, even though it's the middle of the school year, for many of my students, we're still at that guided practice stage, and that's okay because that's just where they are in their reading journey. But I do have higher level reading groups that can chunk text with partners or in the small group reading section of our class. And so typically when they're with me, I'm just kind of observing them and supporting them as needed when they are reading through text together with their partners. And so they're really starting to gain that independence under my supervision, while I'm still able to, during the rotations, meet with the other reading groups and provide them that adequate guided practice and scaffolding that they need as they continue to work towards reaching that independence as readers. Chunking text is really not a huge deal. I know it can sound overwhelming because it's just like a lot to do. I will link down below some examples of lessons that I have found that are just really helpful for chunking text, or just kind of show you how to chunk text down. I also want to say, if we were to just read through an entire text with our students without stopping to ask questions, without stopping them to reflect and think about what they read, you will likely lose a lot of your students in your class. Now, it would probably be your English learners, your students with learning differences who have a hard time focusing, but then you're going to lose other students whose reading levels and abilities are not quite as high as the Lexile of the text. And that is just a perfect storm for some bad behavior in the class. And so, I mean, you all know your students better than anyone, so I think that this strategy can be really helpful to anyone's classroom. If your students are all at high levels of independence, maybe you can have them do like a coaching session where they will like coach a partner through this whole chunking the text reading process. That's also a really great strategy for really emphasizing or re-practicing a skill that your students need to work on. And don't forget that when you do take the time to stop and chunk and chew this text, you are giving your students time to really digest and dive deep into the meaning of the text. For English learners, this is going to give them an opportunity to participate in a lesson that they may not have ever been able to participate before. So, have any of you ever used Chunk and Chew in your classroom? What is your experience like? Do you have any tips that you want to share with me or others about this experience of teaching English learners and using Chunk and Chew? Comment those down below in the comment section. Thanks for joining me here today. Have a great day.